Hi and welcome to another gaming video, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about the Game Boy Macro. A few weeks ago I decided to make a Game Boy Macro, which essentially is a DS Lite with the top screen removed, and then you use it as a Game Boy Advance. If you use an original DS, then it's called a Game Boy Macro XL. But it isn't as simple as just ripping off the top of the DS. The DS needs the top screen for it to function. If you take the top screen off or you take the cabling out for the top screen, then the DS won't boot. So there are three main methods to get around this. First one is the soldering method. You solder a little resistor to 2 points on the board and that stops the DS looking for the top screen. The second one is a bit similar, but rather than solder, it's called the no solder method. You take one of the buttons from the DS, cut the little pad from the rubber underneath and bridge it across those 2 points. A bit hit and miss. I never got that method to work, and I'm not great at soldering, so I didn't really want to go down that route either. And there's a third method, which I've only seen one video on. I've only seen one reference to this, and it's by a YouTuber called GameBoy. Essentially, you keep the ribbon cable from the top screen. What you need to do is you need to completely strip the top screen. It's about 3 layers to it, and inside the actual screen itself is a little LED strip which is attached to the ribbon cable, and you need to keep that. So take apart the screen, very carefully unpeel the LED strip, and you end up with a ribbon cable with an LED strip and the speakers attached. If you plug this in, the DS will boot, bottom screen only obviously. However, the biggest challenge is to fit all this extra ribbon cable and LED strip and the speaker into the bottom casing, because it's supposed to be in the top casing. The ribbon cable needs to sit flat under the screen. You need to make sure that the connection is as flat as possible, otherwise it interferes with the left shoulder button, because the connector for the top screen is here. Obviously it would then trail upwards, and you've got to sort of fold it and get it as flat as possible, and the only place it can go is sort of underneath between the screen and the motherboard. So I got mine as flat as possible. I wrapped the ribbon cable in Captain tape just to keep it safe, make sure it didn't sort of touch anything on the board and short anything out. I positioned it where I needed it so it wouldn't interfere with any of the buttons here, because the cable is quite wide. It sort of sits just about here underneath the screen. I didn't want it to interfere with any of these. The speaker is fairly easy to sort out. I took the bottom casing, I snipped off some of the legs and the plastic on the inside just to make a bit more room, and the speaker will sit just below the Wi-Fi module, and then you run the cable for the speaker alongside the game cartridge slot. Just to allow the audio from the speaker to come out a bit more, I drilled some holes to make a speaker grill in the bottom of the case. And because this is essentially going to be a Game Boy Advance, you don't need the stylus, so I cut the end of the stylus off and glued it in place here. Otherwise you end up with just an empty hole here, and I didn't like that. And then it is a case of putting everything back and making sure everything sits in the right place. And it is quite tricky. There's not a lot of space inside there to put everything. The extra ribbon cable in the bottom half of the case makes it a little bit tight. And so when you're screwing everything back, you need to make sure that you don't put too much pressure on the screen, because if you put too much pressure on the screen, it makes the screen go sort of funny colours. And as it's going to be a Game Boy Advance, essentially, you don't need the touch digitizer. So you can peel that off the front of the bottom screen carefully, and that just allows the casing to fit back without putting too much pressure on the screen. It gives you a bit more breathing room. I wanted to make one of these Game Boy Macros really with as little work as possible, and there are lots of things you can do to them. I've seen lots of people completely take the hinges off here, file them down, fill them with filler. Some of the people take the X and Y buttons out and just leave the A and B, because that's all you need for a Game Boy. But I didn't want to go through all that, so I just put a small white rod across the 2 hinges and left the other buttons in. I've seen a lot of people just separate them with a bit of colour. Now I've got lots of spare DS cases, DS parts. I've got a whole box full of them. So I decided I was going to make a nice sort of colour combo. I was using the silver DS, which was broken in the first place. I wouldn't butcher a fully working machine, so I used some of the silver from the DS that I was using. So silver bottom, silver buttons, and I had a red one which was completely broken, so silver and red combo. Thought it looked quite nice. Got a nice red volume button and a nice red Game Boy Advance slot cover and red shoulder buttons. So I thought I'd put this video out there to show off the GameBoy Macro and to show how it can be done. The other gentleman that I got the idea from and watched his video was great, but the essential part where he showed you where to put all the cabling, he skipped. So I thought I'd show you just where to put the extra ribbon cable and how to fit it all in the bottom casing. Now a lot of people ask, why do it? A DS Lite and an original DS will play Game Boy Advance games without having to go through this kind of modding. It's a cool project. Essentially it's quite a pointless project, but you do end up with this really cool looking modded Game Boy Advance stroke DS Lite. And the DS Lite is nowadays the cheapest and easiest way to play Game Boy Advance games. The screen on the DS Lite is absolutely fantastic. The screens on the Game Boy Advance were awful. The original Game Boy Advance wasn't it. The Game Boy Advance SP had better screens, and if you go for the really expensive high-end Game Boy Advance SP with its backlit screen, it still doesn't offer the screen quality that you get from a DS Lite. I went for the DS Lite because it has multiple brightness options, whereas the original DS only had an off and on for the screen brightness, but you've got 4 levels of brightness on a DS Lite. And I had lots of DS Lites floating around. So this is my Game Boy Macro, absolutely superb. Whilst putting this project together, suddenly realised that I don't actually own any Game Boy Advance games, so I had to run out and find whatever I could get. So I've got Scrabble Blast here. So this whole project has been just so I can play Scrabble Blast. So as you can see, it's a really nice bright screen. There's sound coming out from underneath. Not bad. The volume is quite loud on it. Obviously you've got the headphone port if you want to use it. And there you go, that is a Game Boy Macro. Apart from the fiddliness of getting the cables where you need them and make sure it doesn't interfere with anything else, it's probably the easiest method. The solder method, didn't like that, and the no solder method just didn't work for me. So I went for the third option. Like I say, I just stumbled across this one person doing Game Boy Macros this way, and his video wasn't exactly sort of like a full tutorial. He skipped the main bit. So there you go, that is a Game Boy Macro. If you want to play Game Boy Advance games, it is easily the best way to do it. And like I said, Game Boy Advance SPs, they're quite expensive. If you want one with the backlit screen, they are an absolute fortune, and you can pick up DS Lites for £15 fully working. If you scout through places like eBay or local listings, you'll see loads of them broken hinges, top screen is broken, and great, you don't need a hinge or a top screen. So that's a Game Boy Macro. Hope you like my video, hope it helps and you can build your own. Link, like, subscribe, enjoy.